Hi, and welcome to this episode on my YouTube channel. And today I'm really excited because we're going to be speaking to Kezza Reece. She's an acceptance and adaptation coach, and she's, oh my gosh, what this woman knows, you are going to be in awe of. She's a specialist in neurodiversity and menopause. So how those two go together. She's the first person that I have found who has an understanding of the sort of nature of how neurodiversity impacts your menopause and vice versa. So welcome, Kezza. It's amazing to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Wow, what an intro.
So Kezza, there is so much that we can talk about today. We could talk for hours, but I think if we first kick off about how the perimenopause affects our brain, because of course neurodiversity is all about our brain.
It is. That's right. So neurodiversity and being neurodivergent is about the brain and the way that it sort of inputs and outputs information, and think of it in a robotic kind of way. The way that affects perimenopause is very interesting. And of course, that then has this knock-on effect if you are neurodivergent, is that we kind of get the double whammy. We're already dealing with a lot of the stuff that perimenopause women start to deal with when they hit the peri, so that when we hit perimenopause, for us, it gets so much worse. We can end up burnt out very quickly if we're not ready for it. I have neurodiversity. So I actually have two neurodivergent things. I've got ADHD. I'm also autistic. That's where my knowledge comes from, because being autistic, I've gone down a little rabbit hole. I've done all the research, so you don't have to. So my brain, everyone's brains, are regulated by chemicals, like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. These are names you'll probably be familiar with, or if you Google them, you're going to get lots of information. These regulate our brains. They're chemicals that help our brain function.
Yeah.
When you've got a neurodiversity like ADHD, those don't function like a neurotypical brain.
Okay.
So there's lots of research going on as to how that impacts our brains, but that's what's impacting our brains, our chemicals.
Right.
Now, if you take in on that as well, that we have receptors that use estrogen and progesterone to also help our brain.
Yeah.
This is where people who are divergent can get themselves a bit sticky.
Okay.
Okay with me so far?
Yes, I'm with you all the way.
So if you're neurodivergent, the chances are those chemicals aren't regulating your brain as efficiently as it could.
Yeah.
So you'll have issues with things called executive functions.
Yeah.
These are things like your working memory.
Yeah.
So remembering things like when you're doing a maths in your head, you have to remember the numbers, what you're doing to them, and then you have to remember what the output is.
Yeah.
So if you've got issues with your chemicals, you won't necessarily be able to hold those numbers in your head.
Yeah. I'm just drawing little steps because that makes perfect sense to me. Great.
So we have a range of executive functions. I'm going to refer to my notes here.
Yeah. No, please do.
So the one that is affected a lot with perimenopause is your working memory.
Yeah.
You're walking in a room and forgetting what you've gone in there for.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Emotional control.
Oh my gosh.
So I think we can all go, oh, with that one. Someone says something and your brain goes, nope. And then this stuff comes out of your mouth in response. That's another executive function. That's your response inhibition. So usually when someone says something maybe they shouldn't have done in front of you, and then this rage builds and all this language comes out of your mouth and you're not quite sure where that came from, that's your executive functions.
Okay, so the first one,
working memory.
Mine obviously isn't going so well today. First one, working memory. That's about when women are presenting or in a meeting or whatever, and they go to speak, and then there's like
Yeah, can't remember what you're going to say.
What was I going to say?
Yeah.
What was the point I was going to make? Where was I going with this? And for many women in business, that's the one that really affects their confidence.
It's going to really affect your confidence. You're also going to get stressed.
Yep.
Stress releases adrenaline.
Yeah.
Now, although that's really good in helping your brain in short bursts, if you're running on adrenaline, you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
And this is why I think a lot of women get to their late 40s, early 50s, and they've just had enough.
Yeah.
Because you've probably been running on adrenaline to get your brain functioning. And then the adrenaline can't do that. It's not designed for long periods of time. It's designed for short bursts.
Yeah.
And then you're going to burn out. And when I say burn out, I mean your brain's just going to stop wanting to function at all.
Yeah. So if we take those three areas, so working functions, your working memory rather.
Yep. Emotional control.
Emotional control.
And response inhibition.
And response inhibition. So emotional control.
There's a lot more executive functions, but these are the ones that I'm finding when I'm talking to women are the three they find the most difficult to manage.
Yeah. So emotional control, all those mood swings, anxiety, depression, all of those sorts of things.
Exactly.
And your response.
Your ability to bite your tongue.
Yeah.
I think we've all got ourselves into a bit of a pickle where someone said something, either we've misheard it or it is what they meant, and then this stuff comes out of your mouth and you just go, I didn't mean to say that.
Yeah.
You know, we've been saying it in our heads for years, let's face it.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we can't stop it coming out. That's your response inhibition. That's your ability to stop, think, respond, which we've all done in microseconds.
Yeah.
And now we can't, and the filter's gone.
Yeah. So for menopausal women, this is going to be the first time for some of them, or many of them, that they will have experienced those issues.
It is.
Whereas for someone who's neurodiverse,
we've been dealing with this our entire lives.
Yes.
Like our entire lives.
Yeah.
Mine got worse at puberty. Ironically, perimenopause is called the second puberty.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with it a lot worse than I've ever dealt with it before. But what I've been doing my whole life suddenly becomes very relevant for neurotypical women who are now just starting to have these issues.
Yeah.
And this is why, you know, if you're looking at coaching or you're not coping at work, you're struggling, or you want to start your own business or anything like that, this is where ADHD coaches can help.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take those three key areas. So your working memory.
Yes. So I do this thing called Hack Your Brain.
Okay.
And it's about offloading as much of these processes as possible into other ways so that your brain is not trying to manage all the time. Absolutely, up until now, your brain has absolutely coped with keeping hold of the family diary, all your appointments, the maths on the go, walking around the supermarket, keeping to a budget, all of these things. Your brain has probably done seamlessly for the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Now you're struggling.
Yeah.
So this is where my techniques that I've been using for the last 20 or 30 years suddenly becomes very relevant.
Yeah.
So the first one is to offload, and that's to get as much of that out of your head and to use other things to help you. So I have a whiteboard, and I seriously recommend everyone goes out and buys themselves a little whiteboard. It doesn't have to be very big. Put that whiteboard somewhere that you use every day. So mine is literally in my kitchen. I highly recommend by your kettle or your coffee machine, in your bathroom, somewhere that you're going to sit and see it every single day. And on that, make your notes. Now you have to remember to make your notes.
And then look at it.
And then look at it, which is why you need to stick that somewhere you're going to see it. So for me, I literally can't miss mine. I walk past it every day. I come out of my bedroom, it's right there on the walk into the kitchen. So, and on there, you want to put things like what you're doing that day, notes to yourself to remember to take things to work. If it's something that doesn't need to be refrigerated, stick it by the front door. then you literally have to step over it to get out your house. And these are things that you can do with lots of aspects of your life that will help you. You're not going to stop forgetting, but it's little nudges to remind you. So if you forget, you need important piece of paperwork at work, stick it in a carry bag, stick it on your front door. Yeah. You literally have to move it to leave. You're not going to forget it. Or even better, stick it in the car the night before.
Yeah.
So these things are things you can do to help your working memory with the big things in your life that you're forgetting. But the little things, now, I have been known to walk around my house with a biro in my pocket, and I have been known to write many things on my hand. You know that thing they say about walking around the house with a wet cloth, and you just sort of walk around the house with your wet cloth and you just sort of wipe things down? I kind of do that, but with a biro. So as I'm doing other tasks, I go, oh, I mustn't forget to do that. Yeah. And I literally write it on my hand.
Yeah.
So for some of you that'll work, for others, a notebook, little tiny little A6, A7 notebook is going to help.
I have, apart from my A4 pad, which I make all my notes on, I have my special client book. I have a diary, which I use, and then every week I write down my to-dos and all things like that.
Yep.
So my diary is my latest way of remembering the things I need to do that week, and I cross them off as I go, because electronic use of things doesn't work for me.
No, it's the act of writing.
Yeah.
It's a very active thing to do. So you're literally writing it. And I'm the same. I've got notebooks, diaries, brain fog busters, whiteboards, and I also use technology because I get the reminders.
So yes. That brings us on to the emotional.
The emotional things. Now, this is where it gets a lot harder, because in that moment, you can't teach yourself anything. No. This is something you've got to do before this happens. This is something that you know you've got an issue with and you want to deal with it.
Yeah.
You have to kind of practice it before it happens. And then you have that technique in your head. So when you can feel it starting to raise, you know, your emotions are going and you're getting hot and bothered or anxious, or, yeah. And I used to get a panic attack. I used to wake up in a panic attack, and I could not move on my bed. I was absolutely paralyzed. So there's things you can do that in that moment will help. It kind of knocks you out of it. So it's things like, this is going to sound really daft, but tangy sweets.
Oh, so it's a sensory change. Yeah.
Yes. So it's your brain can't cope with everything at the same time. The brain only has so much processing capacity.
Yeah.
So if you bring in something that's short and sharp, your brain can't be panicking and deal with the short and sharp. So super sour or tangy sweets, absolutely fantastic. And I literally have them beside my bed for in the morning. When I wake up in that panic, it's the first thing I pop in my mouth, because in that moment, the brain can't cope with both. And it has to be something that's super sour. So, and I mean, it's going to shock you, but in that moment, it takes you out of it. Very, very cold water. And it's the worst thing ever. But if I'm up and about and it suddenly kicks in, I'll go and run the cold tap and I'll flick it on my face, because in that moment, the brain can't cope with the very cold and the anxiety.
Ah.
So ice creams, ice pops, ice cubes, very cold drinks.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Anything like that is going to, just in that very moment when it suddenly becomes very overwhelming. But again, you have to have these techniques in place before. It's not something that you can suddenly just start to bring in. You've got to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
So if you think sensory,
yeah,
the things that for you will help sensory, so it has to be a short, sharp shock.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So it does shock you out of your emotional state.
Right.
So fine. That's 2 out of the 3. Then it brings us to response inhibition.
And trust me, I have had some awful things come out of my mouth, usually unfortunately at my husband. And that's when I think I really realized that I was really struggling with that, the rage. And the rage is overwhelming.
Oh gosh. So I can empathize with that. That was the one for me that made me say, actually, I need to go and get HRT now, because
it was
the
for me.
Rage. I'm like the most placid, easygoing individual, and then suddenly I could have ripped someone's head off.
Yes, I've always had a temper, but it's always been justified.
Mm-hmm.
But the rage that came with Perry was just out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is where you have to know when it's coming. So for a while, I actually kept a journal, and it's just a sentence journal. I'm not writing paragraphs, I'm writing a single sentence every day just to jog my memory of anything that may have triggered it, to see if there was a pattern. And for me, there wasn't. It was definitely hormonal. And that's when, I went to get HRT, and I seriously cannot say that enough, especially if you're neurodivergent. HRT does help. It really does help settle a lot of the extra things you're having to deal with. But 2, you have to learn to walk away.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's like a forward motion anger, isn't it? It is. You have to learn to take a step back. Yeah. So I think for many of us, and I know for myself and for the women quite often that I speak to, many of them say, I don't have the tools to deal with this anger. This anger is so new to me that I grew up in an environment and in a body which and this level of anger is not something I've learned how to use. It's a whole body experience, and I don't think we can really explain it. It is a whole body experience when that rage kicks in. I have learned to walk away. Now I've practiced sentences, so in that moment I can put a pin in it, or I need to just take 5 minutes, I'm coming back to this point, and practice whatever those sentences are that would make sense for you in your own language, so that in that moment they're ready, because you're not going to think of one in the moment. No. So I've practiced them, I've visualized them. Very important to visualize it. So when this happened, or when I start to feel that rage coming, because you will see as you start to become more aware of it, there is this, for me it was a heat. Just before the rage absolutely kicks in, I start to feel hot. And for me, I've learned that as I start to get that heat, I'll start to go to somebody, hang on a minute, I'll come back to you in a second, and I will walk away. I always come back and finish whatever I was going to say, but in that moment, you need to take yourself away from the situation. Yeah. Take yourself away, and you do breathing, because in that moment, you are in what I'd class the trauma center of your brain. You are almost back to caveman instincts. You need to calm it down. So you need to breathe in and out. You need to breathe out for longer than you're breathing in. So I breathe in for 2, hold it for 1, out to 3. Then I'll breathe in for 3, hold it for 1, out to 4. And I build it up slowly. And that's what I do till I can breathe in and out to about 8 or 9. Yeah. Because then you're focusing on that. By doing the breathing exercise, you are genuinely calming your brain. And then you'll see the rage just goes, and it usually goes about the same way it came. It just disintegrates. Take another deep breath when you calm, go back and finish what you were doing. Don't apologize. You don't need to. This is absolutely a part of being perimenopause. Yeah. All right. You don't need to apologize. You just need to start back up again. Because if you start saying sorry, you're going to start feeling guilty, and there is nothing to be guilty about. This is perimenopause. We're all going through it together. We all understand, and the men will get with the program eventually. Yeah. Hopefully. But equally, I think if you've taken yourself away and done your breathing, come back to the point, you've removed yourself before you've got to that point. Before you're sort of like prowling around like a caged lion, you've calmed the situation straight down. And as you say, it disintegrates. It just goes. It is like putting a pin in it, really. It is. It just pops. So I think, that's fantastic. So we've got those 3, and I think, and that's probably a great place to leave it, Kezza, before my brain explodes, because honestly, Kezza, I could talk about this for hours, because when we first had our conversation about 6 months ago, my goodness me, it was a revelation. It has changed the way I think about things, most definitely. So thank you for that. And I learn every time we speak. So thank you for being with me today. Please ensure you subscribe, and I will see you soon. And thank you again, Kezza.